Hello everyone, my name is Leah, also known as Wellness Medic. I am a nearly 4th year widening participation first generation medical student from the University of Sheffield. Today this video is kind of a follow on from my previous video that I did focusing on my chaotic medical school journey, and this one in particular focuses on my time during med school and the reason why I decided to take 10 months off of medical school and I didn't know if I was going to come back. So take a seat, get comfortable. I've got my notes scribbled down here, I've got my iced coffee, and yeah, let's crack into it. So to be honest, the first 2.5 years of med school were fine. My mental health was pretty good. I was enjoying it. Feel like I was settling into medical school. I definitely still had imposter syndrome. I was definitely still quite an anxious person. But apart from that, I was doing pretty good. I think through COVID, if anything for me, it was quite good for my imposter syndrome because I didn't have to be around others. I didn't have to compare myself to people. I was very much in my own confined space when it came to my learning, and that was fine for me. The best way to start this, to say really where I started to struggle at medical school, would probably be about 4 months prior to my leave of absence. 4 months prior to my leave was the build up to my exams. Now, these were meant to be my first OSCEs, but this obviously didn't happen, so it was changed to an online summative multiple choice examination. And I was worried. I was worried for several reasons. Number one is that I'd not had any sort of formal teaching in forever. Obviously everything had been online because of COVID. I didn't really know exactly what was going to be on the exams. It changed last minute from an OSCE, and I was just very anxious. It had been a while. So obviously my previous exam had been cancelled because of COVID, so it had been a while since my exams, hence I was nervous. Then we were put into a lockdown, so my then boyfriend, now fiance, had to go back to uni in Leeds, and I didn't know when I was next going to see him. I hadn't seen my family in such a long time because of obviously COVID and them not living local, and I started to feel, I guess, the first bouts of isolation. I was the only one in my household that was sitting a summative exam, and I started to feel very alone. It's also worth mentioning at this point I was struggling with a lot of things that I think I was suppressing mentally. The biggest one being sort of isolation, immense anxiety for this exam. I really didn't feel good enough. I really didn't feel like I was going to pass it. And I think that was the first kind of seepings of depression. But I'd been so focused on pushing it back that I'd put all of my efforts, when it wasn't into studying, into something else, which unfortunately for me was diet and exercise, but not in a healthy way. I should make a whole video about this really, but I had a really big struggle with restricting my diet, unhealthy habits, big body dysmorphia, and eventually developed an eating disorder. So I had that going on as well. I had the stress of my exam, anxiety, there was a lot going on. But, we passed that exam. I was shocked. I remember I was able to go home just after the exam, things were lifted. I got to go home and I found out I passed my exam, sat around the dinner table, and I was just ecstatic. I was so happy I passed my exam. Like the first video, I was so happy until about a day or so later when I suddenly realised that, what did we pass this exam by? And I got you get a sheet at med school where you get ranked and things, and I remember just not being particularly happy about it, but still being like, okay, I've passed, like that's enough, like you've been going through a lot. I was starting to try and get back on track with my mental health, and yeah, I was happy I passed. But then I think what happened, if I remember rightly, was I had a meeting with my tutor, and the first thing he kind of said to me was, how do you think you can improve? What do you think went wrong? And for someone like me that was trying so hard to tell themselves they were doing things right, that was a massive step back, and I think it was one of the biggest things that caused, I guess, it was the catalyst in what became a very big mental health dip. I don't blame them, they were trying to support me, but for me personally, I was already in a bad place. I was already trying to get out of this feeling of not feeling good enough, and for me it was like a massive smack in the face. So yeah, that was before Christmas. So we got through Christmas. I was about to start going on placement full time. I was so nervous but so excited. And at that time I was about to start my 8-week block on child's health. Now this for me was definitely when it got bad. My child's health placement was quite intense. I was put about an hour's drive from home, which I know is quite normal for people, but with the state of mind I was in, I was an hour away from home, 4 to 5 days a week, 9 to 5 placement, on top of trying to study. Child's health is quite a big topic, and I really felt like I had to throw myself in 110% to prove that I was worthy, to prove that I deserved to be there. And this just led to a lot of real struggles in my mental health. I remember I was so anxious about doing anything else with my time that wasn't medicine related that I couldn't eat properly. I stopped being able to eat without feeling immensely anxious or like I was going to be sick. I couldn't sleep at night because I was so anxious and so worried about the next day. And then I started to feel really down on myself because of this. And I remember describing to my partner that I just had this immense sinking feeling starting to come in. Like I felt like the world was falling on top of me. And I just did not feel in control. I remember my boyfriend trying to say, oh, let's go on a walk. We'd go on a walk and I would just feel so anxious that I was allowing myself that time, that I would feel sick, that I would sometimes have been sick, that I felt like a real failure to myself and to my loved ones. And I just felt, if I remember rightly, like I felt pathetic. I felt, how could you let yourself get to this point? You are a medical student. You got in when so many other people that I deemed better than myself didn't get a place, and I felt so immensely guilty that I'd taken the opportunity because I didn't deserve it, because I wasn't good enough, because I wasn't clever enough. And these feelings, which I'd been pushing down, just became constant every single day in my head. You're not good enough, you're not worthy, you don't deserve it. And slowly these feelings evolved from outside of medicine. They became a target at the way I looked. Your body shape isn't how it should be, you're not how you should look, you don't look this and that. And then that on top of, you're not intelligent, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. I really started to feel there was a level of self-loathing that started to come into place. And I think the problem that I had with this, that I didn't address it until it was too late. So I was about 4 weeks into this placement, and I'd really started that self-loathing that we said about that. I really started to hate myself, and that's a strong word, and it makes me emotional thinking about it because it's something I'm still working on now. But I really, at that point, hated the person I was. I really thought that I was a waste of space, which is really sad. So yeah, I contacted my uni finally, kind of told them that I'd been struggling, and they very kindly gave me 3 weeks off. Which was kind of the rest of that placement, and it must have been like, about 3-4 weeks off, and said, look, take this time, focus on yourself, and you can come back. Now, looking back, I think at this point I should have just said, and I remember my nana just saying, are you sure that's enough time? Are you sure you don't need more time? And I was like, no, I just need a little bit of time. I don't want to be that failure that has to take time off because she doesn't think she's good enough. Is that not me proving that I'm not good enough? I took the 3-4 weeks off, and it was really good. I only had myself to focus on. I'd started to get back into healthier habits with my food, healthier habits with my sleep. I'd sorted myself out to a certain extent, but I think a lot of it I'd just kind of covered up and suppressed and tried to act like it wasn't there. And this worked fine, obviously, because I wasn't having to do medicine, until I came back a few weeks later and I started my next rotation. And I think I went in for a day and I came out and I was just shaking. I was so overwhelmed, and it wasn't like it was a bad placement, it was a good placement. I'd had a good day. I'd known the questions that I'd been asked. I knew what I was doing, and I think that's when it really hit me that voice was just like, even though you know what you're doing, you're still not good enough. You're still, like, what are you doing here? You're embarrassing yourself. And that was so horrible to feel. And then even coming out, that voice again in my head that imposter syndrome, depression, anxiety feeling of someone saying, you're pathetic, you're a waste of space, look at you, you're embarrassing yourself. I started to really see myself as I described to my therapist, I felt like a piece of dirt. It all kind of took its toll. And this eventually circulated into, I think when I was struggling with my anxiety, depression, I would pinpoint on one thing. And to me it was, well, this voice just must know what it's talking about then. This is all down to medicine. This isn't anything to do with me. This is all down to medicine. It's because I'm not good enough. I've taken up someone else's place. You should be ashamed of yourself. We need to leave medicine. To me that was like, oh, this will sort it. It must be medicine. It's nothing to do with my mental health. It's just medicine and me not being good enough to be here. It's like, you know, this was inevitable. So I went to my uni again and said, look, I don't want to do medicine. It wasn't true. I did. I just didn't feel like I deserved to be a medical student. And I said, look, I don't think I want to do it. I'm not in a good place. And I think at this point as well, they could see on these video calls, I look back at pictures now, I wasn't healthy. I was tired. I wasn't who I am now. I wasn't the person, and I'd lost that confidence, that spirit, that fighting. I was a shell of who I am now. And I think they could see that. And I kind of was given a few options. First option was push through. Second option was to leave medicine. And third option was to take a full leave of absence where I could have 10 months off, which would take me right back to the start of this block, which runs January to December, or take a full year, or not return. It's getting deep now, but I promise it gets better, but it's a happy ending. I remember just going to my parents and just crying and crying. I remember speaking to my dad, speaking to my grandparents, and speaking to my mum, and just being in absolute sheds of tears. It was a really emotional time, because for me, this was still this is deciding if you're good enough to be a medical student, which you're obviously not because you're considering taking time out. Obviously on top of a lot of other stuff that was going on, there was a lot of depression that I didn't really know about, that I'd suppressed. And yeah, long story short, I took the decision to take time out of medicine, and I didn't know if I was going to return. I took the time out, I signed it. It was fairly easy. I literally just signed a document. That was it. I was free. And I remember just feeling really, really guilty. And then that guilt slowly washed away with relief, because I think something finally switched in my head that it was like, okay, now it's time to focus on you. This is why you've taken this leave, to focus on you. And the first thing I did is got myself a GP appointment, and I was able to speak to a GP about everything I'd been feeling, things that I'd suppressed, things that I hadn't even consciously thought about, and it all just came out, and I was prescribed antidepressants. This was my first experience of antidepressants. And I think when I first was given these, again, my imposter syndrome was saying, look what you've done to yourself, this is a failure. I didn't see them as actually being a strength and being something which I should be empowered to be having the courage to say, I'm going to take these to better my health. And that's obviously taken a complete change now. So I started the antidepressants, and I also was given 6 weeks of therapy. This was really good, these 6 weeks of therapy. They were one-to-one sessions, and they really allowed me to unearth a lot of the things I'd been suppressing for a long time, for years. In the way I viewed myself, in the way I viewed medicine, in the way I viewed me as a medical student. I think what surprised me a lot was during these sessions I learnt that actually this isn't anything to do with the way I viewed Leah the medical student. This wasn't anything to do with, my self-feelings of Leah the medical student. This was stripped away. This was just, how was I viewing Leah? How was I viewing me, myself? And that was really emotional, and that was a really, really shocking, almost discovery to me, to realise actually this isn't anything to do with medicine. It never was. This is all down to how you view yourself. Before medical school, I'd always been quite a confident person. I was fairly self-assured, and all of a sudden I kind of look back and been like, you've taken these 3 years and you've just torn yourself away piece by piece. No one else has done that. Medical school's not done that. No one else has done that but you. And that was really sad for me to realise, but I knew I had to do something about it at that point. Instead of saying, I'm going to take these 10 months to decide if I want to do medicine or not, I decided that I was actually going to take these 10 months to focus on myself, to focus on nothing else but me. And if medical school is something that pops into my mind, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to think about it for that moment. But apart from that, this is all just about focusing on me. It's some time off where I can just look after myself. And that's the way I viewed it. I really wanted to get, at the time in my head it was, I want to get back to who I was before. Whereas now I look back, it's like, actually, I just want to get back to who I am. I want to find that person that I know is in there, suppressed underneath all of this low mood, depression, self-doubt, low self-worth. She's in there somewhere, and I just wanted to get her out. So after the therapy, I really took this time. I found my hobbies again. I found my passions. I did things that I wanted to do without feeling any guilt. I learnt study methods which were going to be more efficient. I slept in sometimes. I took time for myself and I really enjoyed it. I got engaged, I went on holiday, I got a cat, I did everything that I'd wanted to do. And then I think something just switched in my mind that was like, you can do all this and still be a medical student. You can be a medical student. You would have got engaged anyway. You probably would have gone on holiday anyway. You definitely would have got that cat. And I started to get all these opportunities. I started working with companies like Future Frontline. I spoke at my first online conference, Meducate, about imposter syndrome. And slowly I started to feel like, if these people are letting me do this, then they must see something in me. And again, that was about me trying to find, this isn't anything to do with medicine, this is about me. And the medicine, that is a part, and that will come to it. But at the moment we're finding me, and if Future Frontline is seeing something in me, if the Meducate conference, is she seeing something in me, there must be something you're doing right. You mustn't be this person that you think you are. That was a really big confidence boost for me. And I remember, it's so funny now because Tash is literally like one of the loveliest people, she's my friend, but at the time I remember really being unsure if I wanted to go back to medical school, and I would just watch her vlogs on YouTube and I'd just feel so comforted, and I'd be like, do you know what, she's the kind of medical student I want to be. She's what I really wanted to aspire to be. And I felt a strange amount of comfort for her, even though I didn't know her. I was like, she felt like my friend. And I was like, you know what, I can do this. And this took a while. And then I got to around October time, so about 3 months before I was going to go back. And then it also suddenly hit me that I wasn't going to be in the same cohort. Not that I really had any friends in my cohort. I was going to be in a new cohort of students, and this was happening. I had a meeting in the end of October which was going to decide, am I going back to med school or not? That meeting came, and it was really empowering to hold my head high and say, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I don't know if I'm going to go back and go straight back into that place that I was. I was scared that that person was going to come back because I'd made a lot of growth during this time. I didn't know if it was going to work out, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it my best shot. I owe it to myself, and I owe it to the person that I am, that is in me, to give this a shot. I did, obviously. And I went back, and I was so anxious and so nervous, and I was terrified. But I was starting in GP, which was really exciting because at the time GP was like top of my list, and that all went fine. And I think a big part of that was I was working on my own in a rural GP, and I was away from the hospitals, and that I think probably didn't help in the sense that imposter syndrome was like, well, you can do GP, but you can't do a hospital, like, come on. So after that I did public health, which again was away from the hospital, and I would start my hospital placements in May. And they were in, my first hospital placement was in neurology, and do you know what, it was fine. I couldn't believe it, and I can't believe when I said, oh, do you know what, it was fine. I found it really interesting. I didn't know every question that was thrown at me, But that's fine. It's fine to not know everything that is thrown at you. Okay, I know there can be some people which get annoyed at students if they don't know the answers, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day, does it? It matters about if you're learning, if you're passing your exams, if you're confident in yourself. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing fine. I'm never going to see myself as the top med student, but I'm still a pretty cracking one. I might not be the best at papers or the most intelligent, but you know what? I've got a lot of empathy, and I started to use that mindset to fuel myself as a med student. I was like, I've got a lot of empathy. I really care about my patients. I'm going to be one of the doctors that really cares about their patients. I'm going to care about medical students and medical students like me that didn't feel good enough. I want to help them. And again, all of these things that I managed to get involved in, again with Future Online, with my own social medias, it really fueled me. I found my passion. I found my drive. And something just switched in my mind that was like, you're doing everything right and you should be proud of yourself. And that word proud, I think as soon as I felt that, it really took me back, and I was like, wow, you've done it. And I just remember being so overwhelmed with happiness, and I still am when I think about it, because that word was such a sensitive topic for me for so long. It wasn't something that I hadn't felt proud of myself in years, and all of a sudden something just switched, and it wasn't down to grades on a paper or I don't know, anything to do with my intellect. It was down to me being proud of me as a person, and that was really empowering. Looking forward to the future, I have my exams at the end of the year. Am I very anxious about them? Yes. Am I worried I'm gonna fail them? Yes. I think that's normal. Obviously, there is still in the back of my mind that need to prove myself. I'm not going to act like suddenly I've cured myself of all these imposter thoughts. I definitely still get a lot of intrusive thoughts. I definitely still struggle with my anxiety. I'm still recovering from my depression. But I know it doesn't really define me in the end. How I do doesn't really define me as a person in the end. And that has been a massive relief. And doing that, I've been able to fuel my work in medicine harder, because I've taken that pressure off myself to be like, this is who you are. Actually, medicine's a part of who I am. I do so much more than medicine. I work with Future Frontline to aspire healthcare students. I work on my social medias to help healthcare students. I go on podcasts. I help aspiring medics, people that felt like me that didn't feel good enough. I put my focus into helping them. I'm also a fiance, and I'm also a cat mum, and I love reading, and I love learning about Tudor history, and I'm so much more than medicine. And I think once I realised that that's allowed, I can do all this, I felt free. Long story short, I guess, lessons that I've learned during my time at medical school. Number one is stop seeing medicine as you. Stop seeing everything that you do to be revolving around medicine. Because I think I felt so lucky and so grateful and so undeserving of my place at medicine that I made it my life. I felt like I owed it to medicine to give it every ounce of me and give nothing else away. So that is such an important thing, I'd say, is don't give yourself to medicine. Give your passion to medicine. Give your enthusiasm to medicine, but don't give your whole worth to medicine like I did. The second thing I'd say is enjoy it. You're a student still. You are a medical student, but you're still a student. Go in and see things you want to see. Enjoy your passions. Don't take it so seriously. You're still a student, remember. You're not a full-time doctor. If you really want to go speak to a patient, find out if you can go speak to them. Even if it's just to hear about their lives. Even if it's you want to just learn bloods for a day. Take opportunities because you want to. And don't put too much pressure on yourself. And enjoy the experience for what it is, because it is, once I took all of that away, I realised it's a really beautiful privilege to be a part of someone's journey. And the number one most important thing that I will always preach now is put your mental health over anything else. Nothing else can work if your mental health isn't what you're focusing on. That's something I realised, okay? If this isn't one big message, it's put your mental health before anything else, because that really is the fuel that drives the cogs in everything else in your life. If this isn't working, nothing else is. If this isn't happy and this isn't happy, if your heart isn't happy, nothing's gonna work, and you can't expect it to. So focus on your mental health. If that means taking your weekends off, which I'd highly recommend anyway, do it. If that means saying no to going on a night out because you want to see your family instead, do it. If that means you want to sit down on a Friday night and read a book and have a cup of tea and do nothing else, do it. Always put your mental health first, because that's going to fuel every other aspect of your life, and not just medicine. It's going to fuel your friendships, your relationships, your passions, your hobbies. And that's the most important thing here at the end of the day. And I think just the most important thing is when you're focusing on your mental health, you're gonna feel happier. You just are. You're gonna feel freer. And this is coming from experience. And to be honest, when I was starting out, one of the biggest things for me, which led to me focusing on my mental health, was actually when we are happier, when we are focusing on our mental health, we're actually doing better anyway. I've been doing the best at med school I ever have, and that's because I've not been forcing myself and I've been focusing on my mental health. One of the biggest things I want to say is put yourself first. Put your mental health first. If you need to take a leave of absence like I did, take it. You know, life is not as short as everyone says it is. You've got time, and you'll be a better person for it if you need it. I certainly am, and I'm looking forward to the future, which is not something myself a year ago thought I'd be saying. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and also follow my social medias as well at Wellness Medic, and I really hope you have a great week.